Hello there, Tesag here, and this summer I decided to start fixing my daily driver, and while I let you admire me jacking the car up in the background, let me tell you why. This is my car. As of summer 2024, it's 27 years young, first generation Skoda Octavia, and it's definitely not in mint condition. And while majority of people around me keep telling me to scrap it, sell it, or otherwise get rid of it, I kinda like this car. It didn't require much of an attention over the last 10 years, so I decided to repay the favor, and that's why I'm here, jacking the car up. But why not pay some mechanic to do this work for you, like everyone else, I hear you ask? Well, first I would like to learn how to work on cars, and second, as I was recording this footage, I had barely enough money on my bank accounts to afford the spare parts. And I really have to fix this because one of the springs broke, completely together with the rear mount, and both dampeners are basically gone as well. So yeah, the longer I keep driving in these conditions, the worse it is gonna get. Also, I started on Friday morning and Monday morning I gotta get to work. So yeah, and to make it even worse, I have zero to none specialized tools. What I have access to is my father's limited arsenal of tools that are mostly worn out or broken, my wheel wrench, basic jack that is older than this car actually, and this driveway. So this will definitely be a challenge. But I got massive ego, no extra money, and a dream, so let's go. And the very first problem appeared before I even got to this stage. As you can see, I'm using locks to secure the car because I don't have any jack stands. And don't worry, I know where to put them to not damage the rails. But to be able to do that, I needed to secure the perfect locks, which were inconveniently put at the bottom of the stored wood pile. This means that once I'm done with the car, I gotta restore the wood pile as well. Anyway, with the car up in the air, it's time to get the wheels off. And I have done this many times before, as I have been always changing my two sets of winter and summer wheels, myself. So in just a few minutes I am off to a really good start. But I've seen many horror videos online with quick jobs turning into ordeals, with snuffed bolts and stuff like that, so I came prepared with some liquid aid to ease these bolts. On these old wagons, the rear spring and shock absorber is separate, with the absorber actually holding the whole contraption together. So to get the broken spring out, I need to get the absorber first. And the absorber is held in place by 3 bolts, 2 on top and 1 at the bottom. I can only confirm that this is very first time someone tried to ease these bolts in 27 years, as getting them out was pretty rough, and I managed to completely break one worn out ratchet and the only socket I had access to. I guess that there is saying about blaming one's tools, but there is also only so much you can expect from very cheap tools from AliExpress. With the car partially disassembled, I only had 2 options. Either hike 12 kilometers to the town and then back in the middle of summer heat wave, or call my dad, admit defeat and ask him to buy the socket for me on his way back home from work. That's the option I opted for. Anyway, with the new socket I finally managed to get the shock absorber out, but the spring remained in place. This surprised me actually. That's because the rear axle on this car is basically a large piece of strengthened metal, and the other shock was actually holding both of the springs in place. Also, just quick note, getting the bottom bolt out was rather easy. Getting the top 2 bolts out without being able to see under the fender, having the added weight of the pipe that I'm using for added leverage, and trying to not hit myself in the head or the car to save the paint. That was probably the most intense and painful part of the whole job, from my point of view at least. Also, I managed to hit both the car and my head, so yeah. Anyway, even though I originally planned on keeping the 3 wheels on ground at all time, just in case the log breaks or one of the wedges, understand stones, decided to let go. Eventually I had to lift the whole back of the car, off the ground, because otherwise I'm not gonna make any progress. Because yeah, I have to remove both shock absorbers at the same time. I guess I could put it back on the ground, but then it would be the wheel keeping the spring compressed, so This proved to be more challenging, as for some reason the passenger side was a bit more seized. And I really had to take advantage of both of the metal pipes I found earlier to increase the leverage, but I eventually got it out as well. Also, there is footage of me creating the wooden bases I use in between the axle and my jack. It's just a piece of wood I shortened and created few ridges in it for the jack to bite into. The main idea was to increase friction, as there was nothing this small jack would be able to bite into on the axle. But in hindsight I would probably be just fine without it as well, maybe even safer, hard to say. Anyway, with both shock absorbers out, it's time to get the springs out as well, and put the newest one in. Then I had to disassemble the upper mounts of the shock absorbers to be able to reuse them for the new ones, and then put everything back together. Both of these steps proved to be harder than expected, but I managed to find a way around it to do it just by myself. And then I had to put everything back together, and just as I started putting everything back together, I found out that the shock's lower mount was of a different thickness than the slot on the axle, or so I thought. You see, these shock absorbers are supposed to be mounted bottom side first under the angle, and then straighten up and mounted on top. I mounted them on top first, thinking it would be easier to lift the axle up with my jack, which prevented me from being able to change the X angle. Being frustrated, I decided to at least repair the scratch body with some protective paint and called it a night. With that in mind, I basically woke up the next morning being convinced that I have to use angle grinder to decrease the width of the shocks, but then I looked up some tips and tricks online about this issue, and yeah, I learned about this angle trick. So with that I decided to basically redo this whole mounting in the morning. And yes, this is my other working shirt. It's seen some pretty rough jobs, don't laugh at me, I didn't feel like destroying perfectly good shirt for video. Anyway, it was smooth sailing from here. All I had to do was to adjust the springs few times, tighten the shock absorber, secure brake lines, make sure everything is well tightened, and then put the wheels back on the car. And once the wheels were back on the car, then just slowly put the car back on the ground and go for test drive. But let's talk about what I really needed in terms of tools and how tough the job really was, and what I learned from it. So let's start with the tools. I got by just using 2 sockets, 3 ratchets, 1 broke, and about 3 wrenches. Ironically, everything had to be the same size, mostly because for the shock absorbers, I really needed to hold one side of the bolt while tightening or easing the nut, and this is basically for the bottom part of the shock absorbers. Then I think I used 2 flathead screwdrivers to help with the mount and also with the cover for the shock absorbers. 2 metal pipes and basic jack, and that's about it. I also used old tire under the car for worst case scenario, so at least the main part of the axle and gas tank wouldn't hit the tiles underneath it in case the car decided to go down. And few wooden locks, oh yeah, and of course the wheel wrench. So in terms of tool, not really that expensive. If I had to buy everything, I would probably be able to afford it quite easily. The job was rather easy to do, honestly, and should I knew what to do or had someone to mentor me and tell me where to start, what to do and what to avoid, I would be probably done in just few hours. This way it took me roughly 10 to 12 hours. I also did a little bit of research to make sure I won't mess something extremely badly. What really helped is the fact that this old car really has extremely simple rear axle. Not even geometry can be changed on these. One big disclaimer, if I knew in advance, I would buy some thread locker and use it on the bolts to make sure they stay in place and don't loosen up with vibrations. Sadly, I had none, so I just made sure to tighten everything a bit more than I would usually do. And second, if I knew how rusty the mounts would be for the absorbers, I would buy new ones. These are really cheap and it's not worth all the trouble of dismounting them again just to replace them. I made sure these are good enough to stay there, but next time I'm changing the absorbers I will make sure to replace the mounts as well. There is no way these cheap absorbers will survive for more than 5 years. I wanted something better, but budget was really tight that day. And what I learned? Well, mostly maintaining old cars is extremely easy and straightforward, but I already knew that. Everything is basically one big Lego tightened with bolts. Only crucial part was to keep in mind all the brake lines. Anyway, if I can do it, you can do it as well. Now let's just quickly talk about the effect of this job. Because as I am writing the script about 4 months later, I am quite surprised by all the effects. First was the comfort and ride quality. Literally the car is less bouncy. Steering improved noticeably as well, like nothing drastical, but I would say the car is able to take corners about 10% better than before. And I can be more precise as the car is more predictable now. Also at high speed, it doesn't float from side to side as much as before. And of course it's noticeably quieter now as the broken spring was scratching the body. Besides that, I got surprised by the fuel economy. For the last year I've been regularly getting full gas tank and I would be able to get roughly 700 kilometers from a tank before I had to refill. With the same driving style, same fuel quality, same gas station and of course roughly the same time to refill the tank, I'm getting roughly 50 to 75 kilometers more from each tank. This means that eventually these parts are gonna pay for themselves in terms of fuel efficiency. But most importantly, I actually had quite a lot of fun. Anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, it costs you nothing and it lets me know that you like this video. I do have plans on slowly restoring this car to its former glory of being the definition of middle class family wagon from early 2000s, so there might potentially be more videos coming up, and I will see you next time.